SpaceX just rocked the world with the groundbreaking second integrated flight test a week ago, but since then, an absolute mountain of great information has been thrown out pretty much daily. This one you certainly don't want to miss, so buckle up, we are going to rip right into it.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
This video is sponsored by Novium, creating innovative hover pens inspired by space. Stay tuned for a very time-sensitive Black Friday 23% off deal. Hey, Mark S. House with you here, and wow, has it certainly been an interesting few days. Since our last Starship launch video, SpaceX has been releasing new images and videos from the flight non-stop. Here, just as a jumping off example, you're seeing a slow motion video of the hot staging on Booster 9 and Ship 25. This one is amazing, but the detail can really be seen if we zoom in on the boundary between the two stages here. For hot staging to work, the ship's 3 sea-level engines are gimbaled outward to direct the exhaust out of the booster's vents. You want to make sure that you are directing as much of that thrust down the angled sides of the dome, rather than directly into the large flat centre of it. By having them rotated out as far as they can, this gave it the best chance of a clean separation. As you can see, the engines can tilt quite aggressively there. This shot here is a 15-degree tilt on a test stand shown back in August, just as a nice closer example. You can just imagine the strain pushing against the gimbal mount when thrust is offset like that. So from the ship's perspective, as soon as it's clear, the engines are gimbaled inward again to continue normal flight. It's a small detail there, but I think it really makes the vehicle look more dynamic. Very cool. In this same shot, you can also see that once the ship clears the hot staging ring, the vacuum engines on the outside are causing plume interactions on the booster's grid fins. This is neat because at the same time, SpaceX are actually tilting those to help rotate the booster. This method must be pretty darn effective too, because Booster 9's inner engines didn't seem to be gimbaling much, if at all, for the initial flip of the boost backburn. In fact, it almost seems like the majority of the rotation comes from that second stage plume interacting with the almost empty booster and its grid fins. So midweek, another longer duration slow motion chunk of footage of the separation was shared right before the most engines cutoff of the super heavy booster. Now, if we slow that down even further, you can see that they don't shut down the engines in large groups, but very much stagger them, shutting down the 30 outer engines in 6 groups of 5. They start at the outer ring of 20 engines and work their way inward, and I could watch that shutdown sequence all day. Fast forward slightly, and you can see the hot staging kicking off. The ship leaves the camera view as the booster starts reigniting its boost back engines, this time in groups of 2 on opposite sides of the inner ring of 10 engines. Now sadly, of course, that 10th engine never actually ignited, and it was the same side that appeared to have many of those engines shutting down moments later. We suspect, due to the flip being so fast, a lot of the propellant was pushed to one side, starving a bunch of those engines. Scott Manley was also, I believe, the first to notice a negative acceleration at the time right here, which could have resulted in many tons of propellant being thrown forward in the booster's tanks and then backward to smash into the intricate plumbing. If true, that may have caused a lot of damage at this point, but still speculative. Now, SpaceX updated their website a few days ago, stating that Booster 9 experienced a rapid unscheduled disassembly. That is the typical RUD that we always hear. Now, that seems to hint that the flight termination system may not have been involved here as we originally thought. Perhaps there is some basis on engine issues causing the explosion, but this is speculative at this stage. Near the end of the footage, you can already see some of the vapor bursts coming from the engines shutting down. Now, you may recall that I had mentioned that the SpaceX livestream of this was not done on YouTube, but I am happy to say that SpaceX have once again uploaded in order to demonstrate this controllable 360-degree video of the liftoff, all from a perspective from the top of the tower. And I've got to say, the frost cascading down the vehicle looks almost mystical there, but then the view of the passing block of 33 Raptor engines cleanly firing away is just incredible there, isn't it? I've got a link in the description if you want to have a play with it, but yeah, if you just tilt the camera down a little, you can see the orbital launch mount begins to glow red as the outer shielding is blasted by the plume. Thanks to RGB aerial photography, it is obvious that this side of the launch mount was indeed much more scorched compared to the other. It looks like that shielding held up pretty well though, and right here you can see some short flashes of fire on the tower arms, but it didn't look like that even lasted a full second, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. So right, where to next? We've got so many videos and photos to analyse from SpaceX, including this slow motion video tracking Booster 9's engines clearing the pad. Yeah, that is unbelievable, isn't it? Switching over to some of the breathtaking images, pretty much all of this is phone and desktop wallpaper worthy, the sort of shots that end up plastered in history, not unlike that magic first stacking event that I've got hanging up right behind me here. These epic shots tend to become the standard when describing this project. All 33 Raptors perfectly lit with incredible fury. SpaceX were not the only ones with great views, of course. Just take a look at this shot from the everyday astronaut and cosmic perspective, catching a spectacular view of the mark diamonds on the exhaust plume as it extends through the atmosphere. In my initial explanation video after the launch, we talked about those missing heat shield tiles briefly, but you want to head over and study this footage in particular because you can see them all popping off in that amazing slow-mo. Such detailed and mad skills to pick up those shots. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the parts of the launch that we covered in the initial flight explanation video, so you may want to watch that one right here if you want a rundown. We have obviously talked about the two vehicles exploding eventually in the mission, but at the time, we didn't have a lot of extra detail on the aftermath. I just want to shout out Astronomy Live, and I'm just going to show the tiniest slice of that footage and include the full video link in the description because it was such a unique, rare shot to get. What you are actually seeing here is the Starship's nose cone after the vehicle was terminated. Essentially, it seems to have just ripped the nose cone right off, leaving the top payload bay area to drift alone. You can see some plume venting out there as well, and I think it's reasonably clear that this is likely coming from the pipes that connect the two header tanks in the nose to the rest of the vehicle that is now gone. These insights were even sent to SpaceX to help with the investigation, so nice work there. Please check out the full video below. The AstroFerg account on X is full of unique surprises. Now, you may have noticed a slight angle on the integrated vehicle right after it lifted off the pad. It's especially noticeable in distant views like these, recorded from across the border in Mexico. This we think might be done on purpose by SpaceX to ensure that the launch pad and the tower are protected. They are, of course, dealing with the world's most powerful rocket here. As we saw in Flight 1, that powerful plume is very unforgiving, and you really don't want to see that force interacting with sensitive parts on the tower. You could just imagine if one engine flames out on the tower side or a strong gust of wind gives it a push, things could get a little nasty. Giving it just a little horizontal momentum early on so that it drifts away is a good safety precaution, I suspect. It is worth noting that we did see a similar manoeuvre in Flight 1, but we wasn't sure if that was because some engines were out. It wasn't overly clear how intentional some of that may have been, but it is nice to see some tower avoidance action. It truly has been one of the most epic events that I've seen this mission. So much progress and so much to learn. Everyone out there wants to be labelling this a success or a failure. I mean, obviously, it was both right. I think perhaps many don't like the iterative way that SpaceX likes to work. They just try things out and see what happens. If you are afraid to fail, you can't easily push those boundaries, can you? Say what you will, witnessing the largest, most powerful rocket ever created by far almost getting to its target's trajectory was freaking amazing, wasn't it? From a personal point of view, this huge event was also the thing to tip me over the 500,000 subscriber mark. Finally, thank you so much for loving what we do here. I am beyond grateful for all of that, and it came with the nice surprise that we've also passed 100 million views in total. Those numbers are just staggering to me, so I am absolutely stoked that you love our little corner of the internet. Right, so moving on, we have got a lot more Starship and Starbase news from the week, the site that literally defies the ordinary. Ever wondered what else defies the ordinary? Behold, Novium's hover pens, the cosmic sponsors of today's video, and they just happen to have a huge Black Friday sale right now. Embrace your inner nerd with this beauty, the Hover Pen Interstellar Edition, a celestial tribute to gravity and magnetism. It hovers at a precise 23.5-degree angle, just like the Earth's axial tilt, giving us the magnificent seasons of the year. It's a real conversation starter as it instantly gets people curious about how it works. They are refillable too, which means you can use it essentially forever. You can pick one up in Space Black like my one right here, Mars Magma, Starlight Silver and Neptune Blue, catering to every cosmic dreamer's palette. For the opulent touch, check out the 18-karat gold-plated edition, adorned with a little meteorite shard. Novium's Interstellar Edition has inspired many over the years, including being mentioned in Time magazine's Best Inventions of 2022. Perhaps you love the feel of writing with a fountain pen. Well, introducing the Hover Pen Future Edition. This is a 2-in-1 fountain and rollerball pen where you can just switch out the tips as you need. They are a wonderful touch to your workspace as they stand there defying gravity. You can pick one up with a huge 23% off Black Friday deal just for the next few days. Their biggest sale of the year, with it being that time again. This beautifully packaged masterpiece will make for a very special timeless gift for your loved ones. Simply use code MARCUSBF to get that huge 23% discount along with free worldwide shipping on all hover pens. The link is right there in the description. Thank you, Novium. Now, after this flight and the 2 missing vehicles that resulted from their separate explosions, there is obviously going to be the typical mishap investigation from the FAA. Given the well-planned exclusion zones, there were of course no injuries or public property damage reported, and the FAA are now in the process of overseeing the investigation, which is led by SpaceX. This is always an important job, trying to find the root cause of the 2 rapid unscheduled disassemblies. The corrective actions that SpaceX plans to take for the next flight test needs to be approved and all that sort of thing. It really blew my mind that the first crews were already headed out to the pad mere hours after the launch. That is a real stark contrast, with them taking about 2 whole days for the first flight. The massive tower arms soon started lowering, first slowly and then more rapidly towards the stopper at the bottom. A while later they were raised again and closed to one side. Elon was actually quick to visit Starbase, posting these awesome close-up shots of the pad. This is the view that we really wanted, and I'm absolutely thrilled to see that the steel deluge plate really didn't look to have taken any real damage at all. No refurbishment is needed to the water-cooled steel plate for the next launch. In fact, we could perhaps even see the next prototype up here being static-fired sooner than you think. As stated, Starship Flight 3 hardware should be ready to fly in 3 to 4 weeks, with 3 ships in final production right now. We probably do need to apply some Elon time to those optimistic predictions, but given how little damage there is here, I don't see why we couldn't be seeing those large-scale tests happening very soon. You may notice here that the Raptor Boost quick disconnects on the launch mount had already been covered up to prevent any debris from making its way into those lines. All that is needed now are some checkouts and probably a few small repairs to the launch mount body if needed. SpaceX seems to think so as well, because scaffolding was set up only a few days later to let the team there begin work again. They've also started integrating the extra pumps and subchillers on both the liquid methane and liquid oxygen side of the orbital tank farm. In fact, the amazing flight crews had already marked specific spots on both sides where they needed to start removing some of that existing pipework. To speed this whole process up, it seems that loads of the new pipework was already being actively constructed over at the Sanchez site. Now that the flight is done with, much of this is being delivered to the launch site. Now, it also hasn't taken long for SpaceX to begin refilling the tank farm again. Only 3 days after the flight, they had already started accepting well over a dozen of the cryogenic nitrogen and oxygen deliveries each day. That is a good indicator that the vertical tanks aren't going anywhere anytime soon like we may have thought. Saying that, we haven't seen any methane being delivered just yet. That is most likely due to the ongoing expansion of the tank farm there. So looking towards the next flight, we can already see action. Making its way down Highway 4, let's look at some of the future vehicles. First out of the high bay came Ship 30. It sat next to the bay for a while as it cleared the way for some relocation operations, and then Ship 31 moved out of the high bay and made its way towards the Sanchez site. Before long, that one was parked up at the Rocket Garden, where it will be presumably prepared for engine installation in the near future. A little sad news, by the way, the Rocket Garden now seems to be closed for all visitors, which is a bit of a sad thing to see. Anyway, passing by Ship 31 was Ship 29, and that made its way from the Rocket Garden up the highway towards the main production site. Thanks to Lab Padre's Rover 1 camera, we got some great views of those neat heat shield tiles on board as it turned into the ring yard. Yes, that has now ended up in the high bay, and after that entertaining rearrangement, Ship 30 rolled back in there as well. The ship shuffling continued on too. What feels like a bit of an odd move, Ship 30 came back out of the high bay not even 2 days after it rolled in. The attention then shifted to the ship engine installation stand, where the scaffolding tower built up next to Ship 28 was being torn down. That night, Ship 28 was lifted off at last after almost 4 months. In that time, the engines had been installed, but it also received the same modifications to the false ceiling that Ship 25 had, visible from the outside with these holes. That is essentially providing added shielding to the Raptors and the avionics. Ship 28 then made its way towards the main entrance of the ring yard, entered the high bay, and was placed down at the front right location. Just to demonstrate how much room they have in here, in went Ship 32. So yes, there are now 4 fully stacked ships in there. Interestingly, Elon indicated that these are the last of the version 1s, although I suspect that he forgot Ship 31 sitting in a semi-unfinished state in the rocket garden. So next to join in on all the action was Booster 11. This booster has been down at the Massey site since early October when it completed 2 cryogenic loading tests in just 1 week. Since then, we hadn't really seen it do too much, but this week, under the cover of darkness, Booster 11 was on the move and after a couple of hours arrived at the production site. From there, it was moved over to Mega Bay 1 and lifted by the crane to be placed on one of the 2 engine installation stands. Next to this is Booster 10, which has been on that stand now for quite a while, so I think it's safe to assume that it has all of its 33 Raptor engines installed by now. Booster 10 we still believe is the candidate for Flight 3, paired, we think, with Ship 28. The heat shield tiles on Ship 28 are looking pretty clean, and with a ton of experience just gained from that last flight, the big question is whether they have improved the attachment at all, or if we are going to see similar numbers of tiles falling off this one. Regardless, it sure has been non-stop action, and I will say that we are working on something particularly unique for next week's video, so I can't wait to see what you think of that. So after all that Starship news, we also did have some typical Starlink action this week, bringing you the first one here from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, Booster 1063. This Group 7-7 mission was tasked with sending another 22 Starlink satellites to orbit on its 15th flight. Fast forwarding to midweek, we were again across the country for Starlink Mission 629 at Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral. The new crew tower there lit up beautifully in the dark. This booster, coincidentally, was also flying for the 15th time, Booster 1067. It's incredible how far we've come when you see that this is Flight 15 and almost think, no big deal, right? But yes, at a glance, these 2 launches were visually really similar, so we're going to pair them up here to try to help highlight any subtle differences between the 2 missions. So there we go, launching side by side. There we have the details of both missions in the top corners. We had terrific clear nights for both launches as they roared off towards stage separation. Now, one neat Starlink update that you may have missed in all the recent commotion is that SpaceX are now rolling out their new Generation 3 Starlink dish. This new version of the dish seems to be focusing on reducing cost and entirely jumping away from the idea of the rotating dish. Instead, now you just simply have a kickstand or an alternate pole mount, and then you just use the app to determine the most effective direction to statically have it face. The reason that they can do this more simply now probably has to do with just how many satellites are always passing overhead, I suspect. Before, the rotating dish was probably likely needed due to there being only 1 or 2 Starlink satellites passing overhead at any one time. There are lots more to focus in on now. This new dish is also a few inches taller, so the larger surface could increase the effectiveness of it. For anyone out there that happens to get one of these early, please do let me know because I'd like to see the results compared to the older dish. Anyway, back to the launches. Both boosters coasted all the way to their defined drone ships for the 15th landings. The Vandenberg-based drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, supporting this mission. And on the right there, a shortfall of Gravitas for the Cape Canaveral flight. That is always magic, my friends, and now you've got it in stereo view. Now this week we had the long-awaited Ariane 6 rolling out to the launch pad for a full-duration static fire test. That is one of the last big milestones before its very first launch. Thanks to the European Space Agency, we got this really cool live stream of the entire event. Ariane 6 was all ready for the crucial test with everything going well right up until the timer hit 2 minutes 42 seconds. They needed to pause for a while due to a minor anomaly, but it was resolved and counting down again soon enough. As the count approached 0, the Vulcan 2.1 engine ignited and seconds after began a gimbal test. This entire event, which went for about 7 minutes, seemed to go really well, and ESA confirmed that indeed the Ariane 6's core stage passed this static fire test. With this one out of the way, there is just one more static fire test for the upper stage. It's all good progress in the lead up to the flight, hopefully still coming in 2024. Now, I don't often get to talk about Australian space news, but I've been following the story on this special lunar mission coming from down under. We are now planning our own moon mission for sometime in 2026, I believe. This mission aims to send a rover to the moon which will not only study lunar regolith, but also try to extract some oxygen from it. This is all being built in Australia, and the mission is going to be done in partnership with NASA, of course. Anyway, this has been known for a while, but the reason it popped back up in the news this week was because there is a competition to name it. So far, down to these 4 suggestions. Anyway, regardless of the chosen name, it sure will be exciting for us Aussie fans to see a vehicle that we have made on the surface of the moon, assuming that all goes to plan. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. There is so much Starship detail coming out all the time, so you know what to do if you love this topic. If you would also like to help us do what we do and have access to chat with us in our Discord and be listed right here, all this support makes a huge difference to us. Finally, please do check out this video here if you missed it the other day. That would help us a lot. Thanks for watching all this way through, and I will see you all in the next video.